13 True Horror Stories That Will Give You Nightmares. Story 1. Help me. A few years ago my boss went on holiday for a couple of weeks to Spain. Midway through the holiday he got a phone call from the police informing him that his sister had passed away in a fire in her flat. So he rushes back home early, deals with the police and the passing, and everything. My employers told him to take some time off to grieve, which he duly did. When he came back to work on a Monday morning a few weeks later, we invited him into our coffee room to talk and offer him our sympathies and support. About half an hour later he excuses himself to start work. He walks into his office, sits down at his desk, turns on his computer, and checks to see if there are any answer phone messages. And the very first message that plays is his sister, screaming down the phone, "Help me. Help me. I'm trapped, I can't breathe." Still sends chills down my spine to think about it. As you can imagine, he was pretty traumatized. Story 2. The Voice. My grandfather told me this story about how one time he was sitting in a chair in front of the house when he heard his wife repeatedly calling him from inside the house. The thing is, my grandmother passed away a few years before that. But he told me that the voice was so pressing that he actually got up to look inside the house, and as soon as he got inside he heard a loud crash behind him and turned around to see that the chair he has been sitting in moments ago had been crushed by the cast iron gutter that fell on it. If he didn't come inside the house he would have probably been seriously injured. Every time I think about it, it sends chills down my spine. Story 3. I just need a haircut. I was an RA in a dorm for 2 years in college. A girl who had been having stress issues finally snapped. She was found by someone in a dark stairwell. I was in an older dorm, circa 1887, so there were plenty of nooks and crannies. By the time she was found she had already torn out over half of her hair and had eaten it. She just kept on saying, "I just need a haircut," in a perfectly normal voice. It took 6 of us and the police sedating her to finally get her strapped down to an ambulance gurney. To this day I can't forget how powerful she was. She couldn't have weighed over 120 pounds, yet she had this sort of superhuman ability to rip her arms away to tear out another clump of hair and stuff it into her mouth. All with a perfectly straight face. Story 4. Car at the red light. Driving home with a buddy from the high school summer job at the local amusement park. It's about 3 in the morning, and there is no traffic at all. Get stuck at the red light that never ends, and while we are waiting, another car pulls up next to us. A big black hearse, in immaculate condition, with a clown in the driver's seat, with full makeup and costume on. He never moved, didn't look at us, nothing. Just stared straight ahead the whole time. Story 5. Apocalypse is coming. In September 2014, a Utah boy discovered his parents and 3 brothers deceased after arriving home. The Salt Lake Tribune reported finding a to-do list in the house, which included tasks like feed the pets and find someone to watch the house, written on it. The found list gave the impression that the parents were preparing to go on vacation. However, there was no suicide note, no warning that they would do this, and no explanation. After autopsies, it was revealed that the 5 family members consumed a lethal concoction of drugs that September day. However, why and how the parents and kids consumed the drugs remained a mystery. Sometime later, police revealed more terrifying information about the case. According to family members' statements, the parents' motivations included believing that the world's end was near and frequently spoke of leaving this world. Apparently, scared of the apocalypse, the parents poisoned the kids and themselves. Story 6. The Perfect Crime. On November 10, 1923, Nathan Leopold committed to travel 6 hours from Chicago to the University of Michigan. Accompanied by his friend and lover, Richard Loeb, they intended to break into Loeb's former fraternity. But all they had taken was a typewriter, a few watches, some penknives, and around $80 in loose change. Leopold was agitated on the way back to Chicago because the robbery had been a big effort for a small payoff. When Leopold finally stopped complaining, Loeb began to discuss his idea of committing the perfect crime. While they continued to travel through the country roads toward Chicago, they broke into several homes and started a few fires, but none of their crimes had been published in the media. Loeb desired to commit a crime that would create a huge buzz: abduction and homicide of a child. After plotting their plan through the winter, in May, they kidnapped a child they knew had a wealthy father who would pay the ransom. Following the abduction, they beat the boy's skull with a chisel, jammed a rag down his throat, and disposed of the body. When the two returned to the city, Leopold dropped the ransom letter into a postbox. However, their plan to execute the perfect crime failed. The following day, a passerby spotted the child's lifeless body, and soon the police traced Leopold by finding the eyeglasses he dropped near the body. On May 31, 10 days after the homicide, both young men came clean and revealed to the state's attorney how they had slayed Bobby Franks. Nathan Leopold confessed that they had killed Bobby only for the thrill of it. At the time of the murder, Richard Loeb and Nathan Leopold were 18 and 19 years old. They were sentenced to 99 years in prison. Story 7. Milwaukee Cannibal. Between 1978 and 1991, American serial killer and sex offender Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, Monic read as the Milwaukee Cannibal, slayed and dismembered 17 men and boys aged 14 to 33. Dahmer dismembered and kept their organs and bones in his home and used them for carnal pleasure. Sources claim that Dahmer was fascinated with deceased animals from a young age. When he was 4 years old, Dahmer may have noticed his father removing animal corpses from the house's foundation. This may have sparked his mania with deceased animals. Dahmer referred to animal bones as his fiddlesticks and was oddly pleased by the sound the bones made. In 1991, after one of his potential victims escaped, Dahmer was captured and admitted to his crimes. Despite being diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, and psychotic disorder, Dahmer was named to be legally sane at his trial. 3 years later, a fellow inmate fatally beat him. Story 8. The Cell Phone Stalker. In 2007, news reported on a series of ominously precise grave threats made to different families via cell phones. The families claimed that the calls, which threatened to slay their children, pets, and grandparents, came in any time at night. According to one family, the callers seemed to know when the kids left for school and when they were home alone. Families also received voicemails with recordings of their private conversations. According to the victims, the caller was aware of their activities and what they were wearing. The family of Courtney Kuykendall, 16, said that her cell phone started sending text messages to her friends by itself in February, which is when the family's problems began. The Kuykendall family also reported a caller having a scratchy voice and threatening to slice their throats, which continued for months. Another victim reported receiving a call from an unknown caller saying they preferred lemons when the woman was slicing limes in her kitchen. The police couldn't find the perpetrators. Story 9. Marrakesh Arch Killer. The late 1800s saw the homicides of at least 36 women by Moroccan shoemaker and trader Hajj Muhammad Mesfui. Monikered as the Marrakesh Arch Killer, he hosted dinner parties for affluent women at his home, where he would drug them and then decapitate them with a dagger while they were asleep. He robbed them of their possessions and money and buried them. Authorities in Morocco recovered the remains of 20 mutilated people in a deep trench beneath his store, and another 16 were located in the garden outside. Mesfui admitted that he slayed for money, often very modest sums. In 1906, Mesfui was eventually arrested and executed. Mesfui was initially ordered to be crucified. However, the sentence was then altered to beheading in response to public outrage. Ultimately, it was decided that he should suffer. Every day for 4 weeks, he was carried from his cell onto the market square and whipped 10 times with a rod made of prickly acacia. On June 11, 1906, Mesfui was to be walled up alive in the Marrakesh marketplace bazaar. Mesfui went silent on the 3rd day, and many people in the crowd expressed their rage that he perished too quickly. Story 10. Haunted Elsa Doll. The creepy, old-fashioned porcelain doll with a Victorian appearance, red lips, rosy cheeks, and blue eyes, referring to Annabelle, may come to mind when one thinks of a haunted doll. However, it's unlikely that anyone still keeps one in their house. Unless that house is Warren's Occult Museum in Monroe, Con. However, those dolls are not the only ones getting possessed. Disney's Frozen Elsa doll, given as a Christmas 2013 gift in the Houston region, made headlines when it appeared to start acting paranormal. For 2 years, the doll was working as it was technically supposed to, reciting phrases from the movie and singing Let It Go when a button was pressed. In 2015, it started randomly alternating between English and Spanish languages. The woman who purchased the doll claimed that, Even with it switch off, the doll would start speaking and singing randomly. In December 2019, the family chose to get rid of the Elsa doll. Despite tossing it in the garbage, the family eventually discovered it hidden inside a bench in their living room weeks later. Following the discovery, Elsa started to speak and sing solely in Spanish, soon after which the family made another attempt to scrap the Elsa doll. The doll was double-bagged and put at the bottom of the garbage can, which was soon picked up by waste collectors. The family left for a trip sometime later, but when they were back, the haunted doll was waiting in their backyard. In their last attempt, the family sent Elsa through the mail to a Minnesotan family friend, who fastened the possessed doll to the front bumper of his truck. According to the woman's most recent update in October 2020, the doll hasn't returned to Houston yet. Story 11. The Anonymous Caller. Around 1980, a single mother of a toddler, Dorothy Jane Scott, started getting threatening phone calls at work. She paid the calls little attention until one night when the ominous voice on the other end of the line instructed her to look outside. On her car's windscreen was a single withered rose. The stalker would alternate between declaring his love for her and making threats of physical harm. The caller's voice sounded familiar, but Dorothy couldn't place who it was. And she never got to find out. At a staff meeting, Dorothy noticed that one of her coworkers appeared unwell. She and another coworker took the man to a neighboring hospital. Dorothy went outside to the parking lot while her two coworkers waited for the prescription to be filled. She wasn't seen again after that. According to her coworkers' testimony, they went outside to meet her in the parking lot after she didn't return. They suspected a problem had occurred with her son when they spotted her car rushing away as soon as they left the building. Neither her son nor anyone else ever saw or heard from Dorothy again. Her burned remains were discovered at a construction site 4 years later. The discovery of a collection of dog bones next to her remains added even more confusion to the case. No one has ever been found guilty or detained on suspicion. The caller has never been located. Story 12. The Monster Killer. Yang Xinei, dubbed the Monster Killer by the Chinese media, is thought to be the worst serial killer in China's modern history. From 1999 to 2003, he was accountable for more than 67 homicides and 23 rapes. The homicides committed by Yang occurred between 1999 and 2003. He would break into his victims' homes at night, slaying every person inside, primarily farmers, with axes, hammers, and shovels, often an entire family. He always wore brand new clothing and oversized shoes. In one horrific homicide case, Xinei forced the victim's husband and their 6-year-old daughter to watch as he ped the woman. He slayed them afterward. At the time of his arrest, various media sources claimed that Yang's motivation for the homicides was revenge against society due to a bad breakup. According to rumors, his girlfriend broke up with him due to his past convictions for rape and stealing. On February 14, 2004, Xinei was executed by firing squad. Story 13. Texarkana's Phantom Killer. In 1946, in Texarkana, 4 horrifying crimes occurred in less than 3 months. On the Texas side of the town, 3 violent incidents targeted young people parked in lovers' lanes. The 4th, on the Arkansas side, was the shooting of an elderly couple in their remote farmstead. After the shooting spree, 5 individuals were lethally shot, and 3 suffered critical injuries. The cops received very little information from the distraught survivors. The homicides shook the community to its grounds. While husbands were away on business trips, women packed up their belongings, took their kids, and checked into the hotel. Others devised security systems in the style of Rube Goldberg by connecting pots and pans to wire laid throughout their property. Normally unarmed citizens placed pallets on the floor so their kids could lie next to them as they slept with loaded pistols. Texarkana Gazette dubbed the assailant the Phantom Killer. Several books about the case have been written, and a highly fictionalized film called The Town That Dreaded Sundown was made in 1976. In 2014, a remake of the original movie was released. The Texas Department of Public Safety once referred to Texarkana's serial killings as the #1 unsolved murder case in Texas history. The end.